so I'd probably say there's two answers to this question. The first one is with Google Drive, you set your permissions, your edits or views based on the employees at your company. So you're sharing it internally, but if you do try and share anything externally, there's always warnings and notifications and alerts, which gives us peace of mind to make sure that we're not sharing data externally that we shouldn't be. But also, as I mentioned earlier, we have rules in place that can kind of stop us from sharing customer data with external parties. So I think once we've set Google Drive up, we haven't done a huge amount with it since then because it's configured, and then we just get alerts and notifications. One thing we do is we go in actively and look at, we run reports to see what's been shared externally. So if people are ignoring messages or they are sending data and not kind of reading the notifications and pop-ups, we can pop in and look at the reports to see who's shared what externally.
The other piece is that when we do the QBRs, we often bring up external shares. So we'll talk about if there's been a large spike in external shares. You can also restrict it. So if you just don't want external sharing and you only want it with specific parties, so you could set it up so that only trusted, conversations ourselves and Leon have had, a trusted company like Damson or Google or whatever, you can share with them, but not with others. And then also, if I recall, when we're setting up your shared drives, configuring the shared drives correctly means that you've got the permission set at the top. And so you can set up shared drives to be super secure so that it's not actually possible to share a file with anyone outside of that shared drive. So not just outside of your organization, but particularly for like HR documents or executive documents, you can set up a sort of senior management folder, for example, that it's just impossible to share a file in that folder with anyone outside of the group that you have as an IT admin or as the manager have set.
Sorry, just to add to that, we have a people drive for our HR. Sorry.
No, you're good. Go on.
We have a people drive that our HR team manages sensitive data, and even though I'm a super admin of the platform, I still don't have access to that drive.
It's that sort of access of least access. Do you know what I mean? That security piece. Sorry, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add to the shared drive thing, or.
No, I'm just laughing. I'm in the middle. But to actually add on this is what I was talking about before. The first 60 to 80% of any move, this is you actually figuring out what can be done with the data, how it can be accessed and by who. So this is actually a great example of that.
So to you again, Leon. Does Flipdish see a lower security risk working fully in the cloud using Google Workspace?
Similar to the previous one, but a little bit maybe on some of the other stuff like device and end user.
Yeah, we do. We're using Google's cloud infrastructure, as you mentioned earlier. They have all of the certifications. We don't have to worry about anything. We just use the platform, and we know that the security and compliance that Google follows is the best. So we don't have to worry about our security exposure. We're working fully in the cloud. We have rules around usage and around device access. We follow a zero trust framework. We think we have the right policies in place that complement what Google can do. So there's no issues or concerns with security.
Yeah, I think that context-aware access demonstration you shown earlier, it's one of the features I love is context-aware access, where you can give access to, a system like Gmail. If I'm external and I'm connecting on a device that isn't my device, or I'm connecting from a country or an IP that my company doesn't approve of, then you don't have to give access to Google Drive and Google Sites and all the other stuff. You can just give access to Gmail or nothing. But I think a lot of systems are like on or off. And I think the value of Google is like, okay, I can see your Fintan, I can see you've got your username, your password, your two-step verification, your security key, but I don't recognize this device. So you can access Gmail and nothing else, and that protects the drive element like we saw on the demo Victoria showed. Go for it.
Cool. I'd say Fintan or Victoria for this. So how complicated is the move from SharePoint
Do you want it or will
to
you?
Google?
I don't want.
I would start by saying it's not as simple as just moving SharePoint to Google, because we don't have something that's much the same as SharePoint. So I think the first question that you have to ask yourself is, what are you using SharePoint for? Are you using it for sharing files between teams? We have shared drives for this. This is fine. I think it's not like, we shouldn't focus really on the product here, but what are you trying to achieve? What's the use case? Because there are different solutions you can do. You can use maybe only shared drives, or maybe you need an internal site for the team where they can have more information, or some internal trainings. Even in my team, we use a mix. We have an internal site for all the engineers globally for us, so we can share like kind of best practices and materials, but we also have the shared drives where we would share presentations or any documentation or like projects we're working on. So it really depends on the use case, and I think that's how it should be approached. So it's very hard to answer how complicated the move is.
And then I think just from the partner side, this is where we would come in, do you know what I mean, as a partner, and we would do a full discovery. So our technical team, most of them are ex-Google actually, worked on the migration team and email team and stuff, talking with some of you about that. And they would do a full discovery workshop with the customer and evaluate. We've migrated hundreds, thousands of companies from Microsoft and from SharePoint. And so we would evaluate, as Victoria said, what you're using it for and what would be the best solution within Google. There are migration tools that are very mature now. We've been migrating companies for 15 years from Microsoft. So the migration tools are kind of, really very mature at this stage. Do you know what I mean? Which is good.
Cool. Question from Neil. So are there white papers available regarding migration from a Microsoft infrastructure?
We can't see that one up there. Do you want to scroll down a little bit? There are white papers on migrations, and we can maybe add some of those to the follow-up. I don't know where Neil is, but nice to meet you, Neil. It was nice to see a non-anonymous question on there. Everybody else is like, I'm hiding behind the anonymity. We'll add that to the follow-up. There's some great white papers on security, and there's some on migration, both from partners actually and from customers. There's a company called Cloud Migrator that does migration tool. They were one of the first migration tools actually. You can use Google's ones as well, which are great, but there are some benefits of using some of the paid for tools. So we'll ensure that that's in the follow-up as well. Good question.
Cool. So Leon, what steps or process do you follow when someone is leaving the company to ensure that data doesn't leave the business?
The offboarding bit.
So we actually have a SaaS management tool that manages our offboarding process. So we've built a workflow around deactivating accounts. So that works with Google Workspace to pull their data and put it into Google Vault. It also sends us reports via Slack to give us an update of how successful that's been, or if there's been any issues. And then it can also tell us the usage or what's been shared between a certain time frame for that particular user, and whether it's been shared internally or externally. Now, this is all functionality within Google Workspace, but we, like I say, use a third-party tool to automate that process for us.
Cool.
So which editions have Google Vault, or do all editions have Google Vault?
That's an easy one. So you saw my slide with some of the business plans from Business Plus upwards. If you're looking at Google's plans, they're the ones that have Google Vault. The primary plans are the kind of Business Starter, Business Standard, and Business Plus, the Plus one with Vault. And then Enterprise Standard and Enterprise Plus. They're the ones that most of you are going to kind of be looking at, and that compare to Microsoft's ones. Feel free to jump in here and correct me on that, Victoria. There are what I call specialized plans, like frontline worker, which is only for companies that have frontline workers, and you have to meet Google's criteria for that. So if you do have delivery drivers or people working in retail, things like that. And that's a very cost-effective solution. So there's two of those. One of those plans has Vault. And then the Enterprise Essentials I mentioned. There are two versions of Enterprise Essentials, I want to say, I think. So there's a lot more plans than there used to be. When I started, there was one. There's a lot more to remember. But yeah, in the sort of standard set of plans, it's from Business Plus upwards. short and long answer to that question.
Another one for you, Leon. I think all the ones at the top, because you were most recent. For Leon, what's the biggest change in end user feedback with Google Workspace compared to other products?
Let's see if we can get it to show up on there. It's not.
I wouldn't say there's been, we don't get the feedback because there's not an issue. Does that make sense? Like, if we're not hearing from end users, then the platform's working as it should be. So we don't get feedback in that sense, but we do get comments to say that they're happy that we're using Google because that's what they use at home. And they just understand how the platform works, they understand how to, use Sheets or build a slide deck. So, yeah.
Sorry, we can't get the scroll going, so we're just going to have to trust Aiden.
Try sharing a tab instead of a window.
We could do that.
Yeah. In the meantime, how do you ensure that there's no disruption in service when migrating from our current email service provider to Google?
That's an interesting one. I don't mind taking that. So we would do it in a couple of different ways. Depending on your business, again, with the discovery and evaluation, we would look at when your business can handle a bit of downtime. Are you closed on the weekends? Are you 24/7? All that kind of stuff. So we would try and do it, particularly for larger companies, over a weekend. So reduces the risk of any kind of downtime. There are also email kind of continuity systems that we sometimes use if customers just absolutely cannot have any downtime, because obviously there is an MX record or an email record change that has to happen, pointing your email records from Microsoft to Google. For those non-technical in the room. And so we would often use a backup system if a customer has 24 hours, which we've had to do some migrations like that where the customer just can't have any downtime. So it is absolutely possible. Generally, the downtime is extremely minimal. With an MX record change, you can get it down to kind of 30 or 60 minutes, and then email flow is back again. So.
Cool. And kind of a follow-up question on that, how long does the migration take?
Interesting one. How long is a piece of string? I think the migration will depend, or the length of time it will take will depend on the size of your organization. Obviously, very small companies, if you're 10 or 20 users, you do a migration very quickly. If it's a large organization with hundreds or maybe even thousands or tens of thousands of employees, you may break it down into regions and things like that. Google tend to have, even for very big migrations, a 90-day plan for migration. So they sort of 30, 30, 30, and generally break it into sort of early adopters. You get the IT team, and a big migration, you get the IT team on board first. You make sure they feel confident and comfortable with it because they're going to be supporting people. In the second sort of middle phase, you have the early adopters. So they tend to be your Google guys, the people in the different maybe regions or parts of the organization that are going to be fielding those initial questions. This reduces the amount of support that the IT or support tickets that the IT team get on go live day. And then Google generally recommend what they call a big bang go live, where you just sort of have everybody go live on the same day. We do the migration in the back end, so the end users don't notice the migration is happening when it's happening. Do you know what I mean? You could be migrating the data for 30 days, 60 days, do you know what I mean? Depending on the amount of data. We have had customers with terabytes and terabytes of data, and it can take a long time. But the customer or the end users don't notice that. You're then deciding when your go live date is, and you're doing the change management piece and informing them and communicating with them. You generally want it as high in the organization as possible. Yeah, shoot.
Can I ask you, what is device management like in that kind of thing? So if you've got people already logging in using their Microsoft account going through the work,
yeah,
and next while you're switching over
to Google,
Google, how do you manage the devices?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Again, you can phase migrations out. So you might have it that the device, like if Intune or something is being used, you might do that in a second phase. Do you know what I mean? So again, it all is dependent on the size of the organization. With small organizations, less than 100 staff, you can kind of do all that together. But like say with the SharePoint before, we had a 1,000-seat organization moving to Google, and we moved over their email and calendar and Drive and stuff like that. The SharePoint then we did in a phase 2, and the Intune and the Active Directory we did in a phase 3. So it's completely up to you.
You don't need to get back in all the devices or anything like that.
No, you don't have to. You can do a touchless deployment if you want. And again, it depends on what your what you're using and whether you're going to use Google as your endpoint. Like customers do have a mix. That's really common. We have customers that are like Leon's company, Flipdish, that are fully on sort of Google and on the back end, and you know, maybe use something like Okta, and Google have great integrations with third-party solutions like that, like single sign-on systems. Okta is a single sign-on for those that don't know. But we also have customers that like Azure AD and want to use that and want to use Intune, and that fully integrates with Google as well. So it depends on your requirements. That's where the partner and the discovery is really, really important, and figuring out what migration strategy works for your organization. Do you know what I mean? Each one would be bespoke. Hopefully I've answered your question there. Guys, if people want to put their hand up and we can throw a microphone out as well. This sort of form of Q&A was just to get the ball rolling. Thanks.
So we are concerned it won't be easy for everyone to switch to Gmail. Is it possible to keep using Outlook even if we switch to Google?
Ooh, controversial question. Anonymous, was it?
More common than you think.
Yeah. I think we probably all have something to say on this one. Go on.
So a simple answer is yes. As a customer engineer, my most common answer is it depends of your needs. Because like, what's the reason behind them wanting to use it? Is it education? They're not used to it, that change management piece. It's okay, they can keep using it. We have a tool that the name I don't remember. I'm very bad with acronyms. I think it's Google Workspace for
sync tool for
Microsoft Outlook. I think that's what it is.
GWSMO or something. Yeah.
Yes, I'm very bad with acronyms, which is making my job hard. But so this can be done if they want the touch and feel of the Outlook. But again, I would be that challenger and ask why. Because maybe you have just part of the organization that's been working on Outlook for 20 years. And that's where the pushback is coming from, because they don't want to swap. So maybe you can approach it from a kind of, the way that Findan was talking about phased migration, maybe you can do also a phased kind of training and, you know, kind of getting them used to it. They could at the beginning use both and kind of, you know, try out Gmail, for example, on their phone and try getting used to it while still having access to the Outlook kind of interface.
Oh, I think this really comes back to change management. Do you know what I mean? And if you do really, really good change management, this won't be a problem. And like I said, we've migrated, you know, from the kind of digital natives to the very traditional organizations. So again, this is kind of where the partner comes in. Change management is 30-30-30. There's generally about a third of the people who are going to be for the change. There's generally about a third who are going to be against the change, and there's going to be a third sitting on the fence in the middle. And if you do good change management, which means an executive sponsor, which means good communication, which means good training, then you're going to easily bring that middle cohort over to your side. So now you've got 70% of the organization. And if you really work hard and you figure out what the challenges are, like Victoria's saying, what are the reasons that these users are like, I want to use Outlook or I need Excel or whatever the case may be, work with those teams. I can remember with a retail customer in the UK where we had this team that was like really negative against Google, and it was like go live day. And I said, right, we hadn't organized a training session, but we would have Google guides, some of our team there on the day. I said, put me in a room with them. They can ask me any question they want, and I'll just show them straight away. I said, what are you fearful about moving to Google? Well, I'm worried I won't be able to do this. I think Google, and generally it's quite interesting when you do the change management and you do the surveys. We do very detailed surveys of customers, do a LNA, a learning needs analysis, which Noel, our trainer out there, can talk to you about. You discover that a lot of the fears people have or the things that they think Google can't do are actually just a training piece. One of our most popular YouTube videos is how to make your Gmail more Outlooky. And it basically allows you to change some of the, because again, people don't realize how customizable the look and feel of Gmail is. And a lot of users will make it look like this. They'll often change sometimes over time to, you know, sort of the standard look of Gmail, but you can have a preview pane. You can remove some of the extra text that Google has, as well as a subject line where Google sort of shows some of the email. And people often say Gmail can look a bit busy. So when we take people through that, it's that thing of like, oh, this feels a little bit more familiar now. okay, and now actually maybe I don't need Outlook. And if you take people through that and you do the training and you support the users, you'll actually find that 90% of them will accept the change and will move forward. And you'll have some person who's like, I absolutely can't live without Outlook, generally some executive. And that's where your sync tool comes in. So you don't tell them about the sync tool, guys. Keep the sync tool in your back pocket. And it's only for that executive person who's like, I'm retiring in 2 years. I absolutely don't want to learn some new thing. Okay, that's fine. You can have Outlook, but don't tell anybody. So that's how I would approach it.
Can you talk more about native DLP within Google Workspace?
I can talk about it for 2 hours.
How long have you got, Neil?
It depends again, like you say that a lot. Like, is there something specific that you want like us to cover?
I think for me, we come from quite a heavily regulated industry,
Right.
and the challenges when I do an audit is always data loss prevention, and there's always questions about it. We have to have multiple providers providing DLP for different regions, depending on the auditor. They can say, well, this particular product doesn't fit in. Well, it depends. Sometimes we get an auditor who just wants to fly through it, but sometimes you get somebody who will be a stickler.
I'd say they're rare, are they? You hope for them.
Yeah, exactly. So the challenge I think I have is, if I'm looking at this whole thing, look, how detailed can you do data loss prevention all through it? From like, the conjoined approach to like, Gmail, you've got the shared drives, you've got documents, you've got putting stuff offsite, all of that. I mean, that's just like the chats as well as another one where we find there's a big problem where if somebody says, look, show us your Slack, I'm like, oh, Jesus, look.
Yeah.
Don't look at this place with the documents of credit card numbers.
Don't look at this corner. Yeah, I mean, Google DLP is across all the tools, the Gmail, the chat, the Drive. I actually had a old customer of ours, a guy who moved to another company, and he's a DLP expert, and he had gone through an evaluation of all of the different DLP solutions, and he had come to the conclusion that Google's was by far the best, like by a long shot. And he was including Beyond Corp in that, which is now renamed, I believe, to Google Chrome. Google do love to rename things. Google Chrome Enterprise? Yeah, Google Chrome Enterprise. It's Google's favorite thing to do is rename things. I think it's very, very powerful, and you get all the DLP features from Enterprise Standard upwards. So that's the short answer to that. I don't know if there's
And it's the same as you would set it up anywhere else. Whenever you go to create a rule, you can specify a different rule for chat, you can specify a different rule for Drive, then you can have a different rule apply to specific group of people under like organizational unit. So you can go very granular depending on your requirements. And as Vinton said, it covers all of this. And as you could see, like on the animation and all of that, it's gonna pop in real time for the user, depending on the action you're gonna like add in your rule. Do you want just a warning? Do you want them to be able to send it? Do you want to block it completely? It's totally up to you. And as your industry is heavily regulated, I would assume that external sharing would be a big no-no. You can block this. And even in Gmail, we get, for example, for Google employees, the way we have it set up, whenever I email a customer, they're outside of our organization, obviously. I get a little informatory box. You're about to send this message to someone from outside of your organization. Are you sure you trust them? Are you sure you can send that message to them? So it's also coming back to this kind of education and making your users making this conscious decision. But yeah, I can keep going for like 2 hours.
We definitely don't have 2 hours.
I'll ask one more sub question on this, if I may. How does the logging work on this one? Do you have options that it can produce a list of, well, look, here's all the warnings we had, here's the errors, and can you automate that into a workflow? You can export your reports into BigQuery now on the enterprise level, which is quite interesting, and that can give you more capabilities in terms of automations and building reporting dashboards and things like that. But even out of the box, you can do a lot of what you're talking about.
Step further would be extracting it and then putting it in AppSheet up and automating it.
We didn't actually really touch on AppSheet. AppSheet is Google's no-code solution. Yeah.
Which actually will have now also integration with Vertex AI, which is our AI platform in the cloud. So it kind of brings everything together. But this is like
It's next level, yeah.
But yeah, you can extract them and like filter as well by a user, by an action, by the role that actually happened. You add severity to them as anywhere else you would do it. So you can go very granular as well.
The Cabinet Office in the UK uses Google. I mean, that kind of gives you the level of, and now the US Army and some other large US government as well. So kind of gives you the idea of the level. Do you want to do a quick fire, see if we can, I'm conscious of time and getting through some of these?
Victoria, you mentioned about zero trust for allowing access to certain spaces. Is this similar to Intune, where you manage what employees or people will have access to what?
Intune sort of
It
device
is
management.
kind of similar, but not fully. Intune is more, I feel like,
Device.
management, and that would be like from endpoint, also identity a little bit. I think it covers it's partially with Entra. Now I think it's Entra now. They also changed the names. So, I think it would be a bit mix and match between context-aware access, which will be based on either the device or the location or the identity or like a security key. For example, we use it across Google. I have a laptop and I also have a phone. Sometimes, even though I use the corporate apps on the phone, I need that additional step with my security key because, for example, I will log in from somewhere that I haven't logged in before, or network I haven't accessed before. And then also you have the mobile device management that will cover more the piece on the device. And I don't know if I think that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
But again, it depends.
If we haven't answered fully your question, feel free to volunteer your anonymity and follow up.
No, I think in any questions that we address now, a lot comes back to planning and specific use case and specific scenario, as Fintan mentioned before. That's why it's good to get a partner, because me, for example, as a customer engineer, I can advise you, I can provide best practices, I can explain to you how it works, but I'm not allowed to do any hands-on work.
We do the stuff.
They do it. So it's kind of like, the first step. You can be interested, I can help you learn more about it, but if you need to do more hands-on, that would be the partner that helps you with it actually on the day and throughout.
Yep.
Cool, we'll try to do some quick fire then.
Sorry, I talk too much.
So we're working in a heavily regulated industry. Is custom encryption an option in Workspace?
Yeah, I think we covered that in the thing. You can have your own encryption keys if you want. That's recently launched last year or so.
Okay, when specifying a region for storing data, is it for all data or can locations be specified for specific shared drives?
Oh, interesting.
So it depends on the license you have. We have fundamental data regions where it goes across entire organization. In the step up and advanced data regions, you can specify it based on the organizational unit.
Which is a group of users basically.
Yeah, so basically you can group the users based on this, and then, for example, they might be only using that shared drive. So yes, you can specify where it's going to be stored.
Good question.
Is there the ability to install a soft phone VoIP on Google Meets?
So like Google Voice is a product within the Google Workspace, which we didn't talk about. And you may have heard of Google Voice in the US. It's now available on business plans here. There is the ability to add, there is dial-in in Google Meet, and there is the ability to add global dialing, which allows you to dial out. So hopefully that answers the question.
Sorry, that was my question.
Yeah, shoot, yeah. Did I answer it sort of?
Not really.
Okay, that's fine.
Like I know kind of what you're talking about, but
Yeah.
we use Vodafone,
Yeah,
and they link in. Currently, we use the voice over IP system on Teams,
yeah,
but Vodafone are providing the service.
right.
So I'm wondering if we can use a third party.
That's where the Google Voice would come in. So that would be the Google Voice plan or product.
Yeah, but we'd have to go with Google Voice.
You can. I think it's regional dependent, but I know in some regions the third party thing is available. I don't
remember.
know either. Yeah.
Like,
Can we take that I hate saying, can we take that offline? Can we follow up with you on that? I'm nearly sure that is possible. I'm just not sure if it's available in Europe. So.
Yeah, there's a very specific list of regions
Yeah.
for Google Voice. So they're still expanding it, but yeah, I don't remember.
The third party thing, I just don't know if it's available in Europe. That's what I need to check. I know it exists. I know it's available in America and stuff like that. I just don't know if it's available here. So.
I spoke to Vodafone about this just recently, and they were only partnering with Teams at the time.
Okay.
So,
So Vodafone definitely isn't. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Keep going.
Yep.
How compatible is Google Sheets with Excel, with macros, etc.?
Interesting. Have you guys ever done macros and like Google has its own version of macros, so you do have to do a conversion?
Yeah, we don't have really complicated macros. So I would consider us to be quite light users, so we haven't experienced any issues, but
yeah,
I don't think we're the heaviest of users. So.
Yeah, I've actually had one of our customers is the biggest Google Sheets user is actually a finance and accountancy firm. Which is really interesting, and they built almost their entire business around Google Sheets. You can't live without it now. So there is a bit of conversion that has to happen. You've got to do some work on it, but it is absolutely possible to bring your macros over to Google Sheets.
Okay, so we've 6 questions left. So
cool, we're not doing too badly. Yeah.
Okay, can Gemini use a company's existing template documents when generating suggested content?
Interesting question. I would say not yet.
I actually don't, I'm not sure. I think you would have to see and wait when the side panel is going to be generally available.
Not at the moment, definitely. Whether it's on the, good question though, whether it's on the roadmap, I'm not entirely sure.
I don't remember, and they were about to release the new roadmap this week.
I know,
I haven't looked at it yet.
We have a customer. We have a customer Gemini session in actually Estonia. So the team is flying over there next week, and the Google roadmap release is the day before. I'm going to be reviewing it on the plane before we get there.
What tools do admins have available for controlling and auditing user data?
Oh, excellent question. I mean, out of the box, you've got a huge amount within with some of the stuff Leon and Victoria were talking about, the reporting.
Yeah,
and
we can go in and ad hoc, and there's hundreds of predefined kind of metrics that you can search on.
Yeah.
You know, usernames.
Yeah, but the predefined DLP rules and stuff are really helpful, and the predefined reports.
So we just dip in there and filter it by whatever's available, and it's been really helpful.
Yeah, and then anything you can do a search for, you can create a report for and have it notify you again. Do you know what I mean? So if there's something you're constantly having to go in and I'm looking for like external shares or whatever the case may be, you can just say, look, just send me an email every time someone does this, or once a week with a summary. And then you can also take actions. So within the Security Center, if you're on Enterprise Plus, you can take actions within that. The Security Center actually allows you to build your own sort of dashboard, which is kind of cool. And then there are also third-party tools as well. There's actually a really good Irish company called GAT, the General Audit Tool, which is, if anyone is in IT for a long time, remembers Baker Networks. They're a security firm in Ireland. They built a platform that augments Google's auditing. So there's both a huge amount within Google if you're on some of the higher plans, and some customers do the add-ons if they don't want to do the upgrade.
Okay, 4 questions left. Will Google Vids be part of the standard business subscription, or is it an additional add-on?
Excellent. I have absolutely no idea. I know it's going to be part of some of the plans, but I'm not sure which ones.
I don't think they announced it yet for us even. We just started to have access internally recently just to kind of play and plug and play. It's actually super cool.
I'm so jealous that you have access to it already. I really want it. It only literally just got announced like 2 weeks ago at Next. So sorry about that.
Yeah, and I think that in June they're gonna add it to like trusted tested programs, so people can also try it. So I would imagine that in June we will have more information.
More info. It's only an alpha now. So.
So do you have a data center in Dublin now, or is it just a POP for your fibre network?
We unfortunately do not have a data center in Dublin or Ireland. The closest one is London. Have Netherlands, Paris, loads of them, but not a physical one in Dublin.
What additional components are in the advanced protection components that have helped achieve the 0% phish rate?
Just read that again. There's a lot to that question.
Components are in the advanced protection
Program,
components that have helped achieve the 0% fish rate.
Well, I think the 0% fish rate is as part of having the security key. So the physical security key is one, and then the advanced protection program sort of adds. Google don't really get into the details, but it sort of monitors that account more closely, and it's particularly used for like executives and famous people and journalists and things like that, where their account is actually being targeted.
And I would also say that when you sign up for it, it can also provide you with like best practices and recommendations, which I feel like is very important, because sometimes there might be an obvious thing that we don't think about, and they'll be like, oh, look at this, and maybe you want to increase the security there.
It still astounds me the number of people that don't have two-step verification, like on every web-based like sign-in that you have. So I mean, like if you were to do a physical security key and you were to set up the two-step verification with security and remove the other ones, like text message now as a second step is not secure. We have had customers who were targeted, who were sort of well-known brands, and the mobile numbers were mirrored or copied, whatever it's called. So like that's not so we get customers to add two-step verification, but not to use text message. Like use a physical security key or use one of Google's keys on the phone or prompts on the phone. It is very easy now with two-step. It used to be a horrible process. I mean, we all remember it with the banks and the little button thing that we probably still have to do sometimes. It's a lot easier than it used to be.
Great. So final question is regarding the shared drive approach to accessing and sharing of subfolders. Okay. What is the prescribed strategy for managing customer data by department? So, for example, how would you manage finance data versus general
Interesting
data?
question. That feels like someone who's already familiar with shared drives. It's a good question.
So at Flipdish, we have shared folders for departments, and then we have shared folders for departments based on
shared drives or
drives.
Right. Yeah. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, and then shared. So we'll have like a HR department internal and then a HR department external, and then we customize the permissions based on that. We try not to nestle too many folders within subfolders, so we end up creating more additional shared drives, but we feel that gives us better security and visibility of what we're sharing externally, and we can label those folders.
It's almost like you had a Google partner to help you. Sorry, couldn't help that. But yeah, that is a best practice that we would recommend. How Leon is describing it. You can add people to subfolders within, or even groups to subfolders. But what you need to remember with shared drives is you can't take away access. So you can't add someone to a shared drive and then go, I don't want John to access this subfolder. You can only add access. So you can have different levels, like I said, within the security. You can have view, you can have comment, you can have edit access, but there's different levels of edit access. So you can have a contributor, which can do non-destructive things. So they can add files, but they can't delete them, they can't move them, they can't delete folders and things like that. So a lot of customers will use that contributor one. And then there's kind of a manager level, which is not quite an admin, but they can do quite a lot. And it's interesting, our most popular video is still, which is from years ago, and I hate it because it's an old one and my camera was crap back then. But it's how to set up a secure shared drive. It's literally one of the most popular ones. So I think it is something that when people are moving to any cloud-based system, they're trying to figure out, how do I ensure my data is secure? And in Google, customers always come to us and say that it is easier to understand that their data is secure in Google Drive than in something like OneDrive. It's actually one of the key reasons people move over, one of a set of reasons, because within Microsoft, the sharing stuff with the links you can generate and things like that can sometimes make it a bit opaque, where people don't quite know who can access files. I can see a few smiling, nodding heads. And that's been a frustration. And I was forced to use Microsoft. I use it as in a non-profit that I volunteer for. And again, I had that same problem myself. I was chairperson, I was working with a board, and I wasn't quite sure. I didn't feel confident who could see what files. And I ended up in scenarios where I was like, that file's anyone with the link. That's not what I had set up, and I had to reduce it down. So in Google, it's much clearer what you're doing when it comes to sharing files. And also, everything is only in Google Drive. It's not in SharePoint or Teams or OneDrive. It only can exist in Google Drive. You can share it across the other things, but it's still only in Drive, and it still has the permissions of whatever that shared drive it's in. Does anybody, sorry, do you want to add something? I was just going to say if people have more questions.
I like to sometimes check as well. If let's say I prepare the doc and I'm working on a project with people and then they claim that I haven't shared it with them, you go to click share and you can see that they have editor access and I'm like, yes, I shared it with you. But like what Fintan said as well, like it gives you that visibility straight away and you can see, for example, their editor, no, actually I want them to only be commenter. It takes 10 seconds and they're only a commenter. It's going to sync automatically straight away.
And the expire access is brilliant, where you can set someone's access, say, well, I want John to have access, but then I want it to expire in a week or 2 weeks. You can do that with emails as well, confidential send. I think that's really powerful and just gives that improved control. Any questions to the floor?
Yeah.
Before we wrap?
Before we finish up, any questions anyone wanted to call out?
No.
Thanks again for everyone coming. I hope you found the session valuable and informative. If you do have any more questions, feel free to ask the team out on the floor, of course.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. It was great.